So the market equilibrium is essentially the combination of the demand curve and the supply curve. And the particular equilibrium is the intersection where they meet, the price and the quantity that results from that intersection. It is essentially the point at which this is the willingness to pay of consumers for these type of products. They are willing to pay this amount of money. And producers, through different market research and surveys and stuff like that, and even algorithms through data science, understand or have a good idea of how much are those consumers of the products they make willing to pay for them. So they basically see, oh, these consumers in this market are willing to pay this amount of money. So I need to produce sufficient units that I can sell at that price, and that basically that implies that my costs are lower than that, so that I have a profit, and that I can recuperate all the different costs that I invested since the beginning and earn a profit. They need to understand that, well, if my customers are only willing to pay this amount of money, I have to sell at that amount of money. Therefore, I need to produce at a cheaper cost and essentially make a profit. And that is why only the most efficient and most competitive firms that are able to produce at a lower cost than what consumers are willing to pay for that will survive in the long run. And only the consumers that are willing to pay the amount of money that allows firms to survive will be the ones that actually get to buy those products. Because probably many people in this country would like to buy a yacht. I know I would, but I don't have the amount of money you need to actually cover the cost of production of a yacht and like all that comes into having a yacht. Therefore, the amount of people that will get to basically enjoy having a yacht in, like, I don't know, anywhere you want in one of these Mexican beaches, well, it's just a small amount of people. But if I'm in the market of elotes verdes or just literally a lot of the different canned food items, well, there are many more people that like to buy them, but there's also many more people that can buy them because the cost of production are much smaller, and therefore you can still exist in that market with a much smaller profit margin and satisfy many more customers. And actually the dynamics at which you produce depend, as I was saying in the last question, on that particular market and that particular type of consumers. If you can satisfy many customers, you can have really small margins because you're in the aggregate with the millions of units you're selling, you create a sufficiently big profit. If you are in a business in which you have just a handful of consumers, then your profit margins need to be much bigger in order to actually make the same size of profit. Any questions regarding the idea of how the market equilibrium is a combination of the demand and the supply side of things? But what is, or how do you define a market equilibrium? And literally, as you can see in the slide, the market equilibrium is a price vector. But basically, prices are basically just a vector of a bunch of prices for a bunch of products. And those products could be different brands, for example, of the same type of product. In all the different stores in this particular region. So there's like a bunch of products and a bunch of prices. And with that price vector, what consumers decide is essentially if they can obtain that product and through that product maximize their utility. That is the first idea behind the equilibrium price. And the other one involves the producer side of things, which is that market's clear. Let me be a little bit more specific. If that is the equilibrium point, as you see on the slide, and you have the demand side of things and the supply side of things, and as you see two triangles there, the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. And we will talk much more into depth about both of these surplus later on in the course, like halfway around the semester. But the consumer surplus represents the happiness or the utility that those consumers that bought those goods derived from buying those goods and using them or having them or whatever. And the producer surplus are essentially the profits made by those firms for all of those transactions completed, or those completed transactions. Therefore, when you want to have markets clear, essentially what you imply is that all of the consumers that are willing to pay this amount of money, the equilibrium price, for this product can actually find a unit of that product in some store and actually buy it. And producers at that price make sufficient money that they generate some profit, and they also satisfy their own needs. That is the idea of the market equilibrium. If you have a market in which, yes, consumers are satisfied, but producers will not be able to sustain this price because they're not making profit, they're actually losing money, that market will collapse quickly and there will be no market equilibrium. In other words, that is an unstable market equilibrium. Essentially, at the equilibrium price, the people who value a product more than the price they see at the store will buy it. And those firms that can produce those products at a cheaper price than what they're going to sell it at the store will be able to participate in that market and with that generate some profits. Yes. So the market equilibrium implies a unique price at which essentially the supply and the demand are equal. You find all the consumers that are willing to pay for that product at that price. All of them buy their transaction, they are satisfied. All of them buy the different products, they do those transactions and are satisfied. And those producers that can produce at a cheaper price supply all the units necessary to not have inventories, to basically to get out all the product and make a profit out of all of those transactions. That is the market equilibrium. And that is why supply and demand is equal in the market equilibrium. At that particular point, if the market is competitive, and I highlight the idea of if the market is competitive, both groups, consumers and producers, will maximize their surplus, will be as well off as they could be. Questions regarding the idea of how to define a market equilibrium?